Welcome to my video. My name is Mia and I study child and youth care at Oulton College here in New Brunswick. The video today is about adoption. I'm going to specifically talk about public adoption in New Brunswick and Canada. We're going to go over who the children in need of adoption are, what some of the barriers they face are, as well as an overview of the process. We'll end today with an interview with someone who has been through the process, just to get a little bit of insight. I would like to mention before we start, if you have any questions related to adoption that you'd like to ask me, please feel free to do so. Just leave them down in the description below, and for the next, not the description, but the comment section. And for the next 2 weeks, I will be monitoring the comment section to make sure to answer any questions you have. So let's get started. I thought we could start off with a bit of an icebreaker and test your knowledge, see where you're at right now. So let's play The Fact is Right. The rules are simple. I'm going to ask you a question and I'm going to give you multiple choices. I'll give you a few seconds, about 3 to 5 seconds, to make a choice in your head, and then I'll reveal what the right answer is. So let's get started. Question 1. So how many youth and children are waiting to be adopted here in New Brunswick? Is it 200, 300, 400, or 500? The answer is 400. There are currently a little over 400 children and youth waiting to be adopted in our public system right now, here in New Brunswick. That was New Brunswick. How about Canada? So in all of Canada, how many children and youth are waiting to be adopted? 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, or 60,000? And the correct answer is 30,000 children, and that's no number to sneeze at. So in New Brunswick, how old are these children on average? Are they 2 years and older, 6 years and older, 9 years and older, or 12 years and older? The answer is 12 years and older in New Brunswick. But let me check with you. What about Canada? Is it the same? No. Overall in Canada, the average would be around 6 years old and older. In New Brunswick, our youth seem to be a little older on average. So how long does it take on average to find and adopt a healthy newborn baby? A year, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years? The answer is 8 years and even more. It can take 8 to 10 years on average to find a healthy newborn baby. And what about these children that are in the public system? How long does it take on average to adopt a child with special needs? A year, 3 years, 5 years, 8? It actually on average takes about a year, although it can vary a lot from person to person. Which type of adoption is the most popular? Open adoption, international adoption, private adoption, or public special needs adoption? With an overwhelming majority, overseas or international adoption is the most popular. And do you know what the minimum requirements to be able to adopt are? Do you need to be a Canadian citizen over the age of 19 and without a criminal record? Be a Canadian citizen over the age of 19 in a relationship for a minimum of a year and neither have a criminal record? Do you need to be a Canadian citizen over the age of 19 and have a full-time job and no criminal record? Or do you need to be a Canadian citizen between the ages of 19 to 60 and without a criminal record? The minimum requirement to adopt is to be a Canadian citizen over the age of 19 and without a criminal record. I should also note that if anyone living with you is over the age of 19, they also have to have no criminal record. So that was fun. We got to see a little bit what we know and have a bit of an intro. We keep talking about these children in the public system, or these children with special needs. What do we mean by that? Who are New Brunswick's awaiting children? Well, there are children who are typically a bit older, so they're usually 2 years and older. Like we saw, a lot of them can be much older, and there are a lot of teenagers too. Sometimes it's just the fact that there's more than one coming in as a package. If they're part of a sibling group, it does make them less eligible for adoption if someone is looking for a single child. They may have been exposed to drugs or alcohol while the mother was pregnant with them, and that can cause different health problems like alcohol fetal syndrome and other such disorders. They could have behavioral issues. They may have picked up some behavioral issues or have gone through some trauma that causes them, or this could simply be due to the previous points. Maybe they have learning disabilities or cognitive disabilities. They may have different needs in that sense. And honestly, they may have attachment difficulties. And it can take a bit more effort to get them to bond with you. A lot of these children may have suffered abuse or neglect. This may have delayed their developmental growth, and they may need a little extra help to grow and come into their own. They may need extra therapy or even some specialized care. To give you an example of the type of youth that may be waiting to be adopted, today we're going to take a look at Zoe's adoption story. Zoe was adopted at 15 by her adoptive parent, and I'm going to let her tell you about it.
I entered the foster care system at a very young age. I was 1.5. Some foster families were good and some foster families weren't as good. And I remember this one family when I was 3. They treated us very terribly. They would make my brother do chores. And when I would try to help him with the chores, they would just kind of throw me to the side and tell me to leave him alone. And they would feed us not what they would eat, like steak and potatoes. They would feed us baked beans. And so I asked my social worker, well, can I be adopted? And she asked, is that what you really want? And I was like, yeah, like that's exactly what I want.
Having been adopted myself, I had an experience that I could put to good use, maybe to help somebody else.
I met her in October, and that February 14th, we made it official that I would move in with her, and that's our anniversary, Valentine's Day. So she knew I liked dolphins, and she knew I liked the color blue. And so when I was living with my foster mom before I moved in, she painted a mural of dolphins on one side of the room, and then it like went in the upper and it turned into night sky. So it was like gorgeous painting. It was that moment that I felt, okay, maybe I can be at home.
She didn't want to call me mom because that reminded her of her birth mother. But at this one particular moment, she called me Mama. And that eventually became Mama Goosey, and I would call her my baby Goosey. And that was a very special moment for me because it showed that we had made the transition into being an actual mother and daughter. It took my breath away.
Because of her, I'm such a successful woman. I graduated university with a criminology degree, and I just got accepted into the social work program. I have a beautiful 4.5-year-old son.
Foster children or older children needing to be adopted are like red M&Ms. There may be a hard outer shell, but once you break through, They're the most interesting in the package.
So that was Zoe, or should I say Baby Goosey's adoption story with Mama Goosey. But we also see how many of our youths go through life without having been adopted, and can give us a bit of perspective. But I hope you enjoy that video. There'll be a link to it in the description box. So enough blubber blabber. How about we have fun and see what your adoptability score is? What I've done is I've created a bit of a game where I'm going to ask questions, and then I'll have you answer yes or no in your head. And for every yes, you lose a point, but for every no, you gain a point. So let's see by the end what your adoptability score is. Now, ahead of time, I have asked some people in my field to fill out a survey and give me their opinions on these same questions. So for fun, we get to see what their results are, which could be very different than yours. So the first question is, do you have siblings? Now, in my survey, actually a vast majority had siblings. Are you and your siblings close? I had a bit of mixed results from this one, as you can imagine, from such a straightforward question for not a straightforward answer. But it did seem that the majority felt they were close, or at least medium close. Do you have a physical disability? Now, on average, people responded with no for this one. Do you have a cognitive disability? Again, when I looked at the results, this one also was a majority no. Do you have a learning disability? Now, this one, interestingly, had a majority yes response. It may have changed by the time you see the survey results. Do you have a mental health disorder? Again, this one was a mixed response. Again, majoritarily yes. And did you have any large medical concerns as a child? For our group, this one was not as common. Did you have any behavioral issues as a youth? And I know that's a bit of a broad question, but I'm sure you can take a jab at your answer. Did your family have weak or non-existent support systems during your childhood? This can make a big difference for how things go down. So from what I can see, most people said yes, but there was quite a lot of uncertainty on the responses for this one. would you have been sent to a foster home or a residential group home if you had suddenly become an orphan at the age of 12? As compared to if you would have just been adopted by someone you know for sure. This one, again, a little hard to guess. It's more of a feeling than a fact, but it's nice to think about. So, just tally up your score and leave a comment below and tell me, what score did you get? It is possible to get a score in the minuses, so don't be too concerned. So what are the common barriers that children and youth in our public system face to being adopted? One of the first things that comes to mind is this idea of a perfect child. Everyone kind of wants the perfect child. One of the first things we say when we want a child is we just hope that they'll be healthy and happy. And children in the public system waiting to be adopted aren't necessarily healthy or happy currently. And this can be a barrier that people face when thinking about this option. It's very intimidating, to be honest. If you've never raised a child, it could be doubly so intimidating, because just the idea of raising a child could be overwhelming to a lot of people, yet alone a child that may have special requirements or need a little more from you than your average child. It's a huge responsibility to have any child, but there's an extra sense of responsibility that we feel when we think of the children in these situations, because we know that they've already been through something. There's already something going on to cause them to be in your care, so you feel extra responsible to them to give them the life that you've promised because you chose to adopt them. And honestly, you could wonder, is it worth the extra effort? No one likes to say these things out loud, but it's really important to think about and consider, is this what's actually my barrier? Is it that it's extra effort and it's more than I know I can give? So in all, let's discuss. What about you guys? Have you ever been fostered or adopted? A lot of people who have been may have a bit of a more open mind to this option. If you haven't, perhaps you hadn't considered it yet, or maybe you just considered it in passing. In my survey, we can see a few results of how other people answered for all of these questions, and I'll have them showing there. Do you wish to raise a child or children at some point? Obviously, if you're not interested in having children, then you probably aren't looking to adopt a child. But it is to note that when you're older, you can still choose to adopt. And what are your personal barriers to adoption? I'm going to have a few examples of the comments that I received, but feel free to talk about it and discuss in the comment section below. I'd love to know what you guys think. Same thing for your deal breakers. If you are interested in adoption, are there certain things that you feel are too much for you? Like, are you more okay with adopting a child who is older than you are with one who's younger, or in a sibling group, or with any special needs or disabilities? I'm curious to know. So what is the process like? The process of adoption is probably the most feared, or maybe the second most feared part of adoption. We always hear about how long it takes and how much paperwork is involved and etc. I'm going to go over the process a bit with you, just so you have an idea of what it's like and maybe demystify it a little bit. I'm not going to lie to you, it is a tedious process, or at least I've been told, but it's good to know what it is, and then it might be a little less intimidating. So the first thing to do is to call the nearest departmental office. I would give you a phone number, but it depends where you live. So if you would just either Google it, or in your phone book, it's actually the blue section in governmental departmental section at the end. So if you go look for a departmental office in the blue section, the number will be there for your local area. But of course, you could just look it up online. Then you're going to be given an application. Filling out an application sounds easy, but it's actually a very detailed application that you need to fill. Then you're going to attend pre-service training for prospective adoptive parents. In other words, you're going to have some crash courses to go to and specific training or helpful things to prepare you for the process and get you ready to go. You and your adoption social worker will then start beginning the home study. You'll be interviewed, and they'll look over your home and make sure that everything is in order and know all of the differences to pair the right child with you. You're also going to be asked to provide a medical assessment from your family doctor to show what kind of health level you're at. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but you, as well as everyone over the age of 19 that lives with you, must clear a criminal background check to be able to be eligible. You're also going to be asked to give 3 references, written references, and you're going to undergo pre-placement visits. Now, at this stage, a child has been identified as being a good fit with your family or vice versa, and they're going to start monitored visits with the social worker, and eventually transition to visits without the need of that extra surveillance or that third party, and you'll be able to spend a bit more and more time with the child and get to know each other. And then, if all is well, the child moves in and the adoption is complete, and you receive an adoption certificate to prove that the child is fully adopted by you. Now, at any point in this process, you can cancel an adoption process. But I'm sure you might have a few questions for me. So how long does it take? Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, it can take on average a year to adopt in the public system. Now, that can vary greatly on different uncontrollable factors and with a little bit of luck, but typically that's how long you can expect. How much does it cost? Well, public adoption is free. You don't have to pay the large fees that you and the large amounts that you would pay for private adoption or even international adoption, which you can look at thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. Public adoption is supported by the government to encourage and promote these children to be adopted because they have the greatest need. So the government actually covers the costs related to the adoption. With the exception if you adopt from another province in Canada, you are going to need to travel there for the pre-placement visits and all that, and the travel costs aren't covered. But considering everything else, even extra therapy or specialized care can also be covered, and the government does offer subsidies that are definitely worth looking into. And what if you change your mind? Well, at any point before the adoption is complete, if something doesn't feel right, if for whatever reason you feel like you can't go through the process or something dramatic changed in your life, you can cancel an adoption at any point. What if the birth parents change their mind? A big fear that people can have, and unfortunately a valid fear people can have. Yes, if the child is voluntarily put for adoption, as opposed to by mandate, which both can happen, it is possible for them to also withdraw at any point, just like you can withdraw at any point. Except, of course, once it's complete. We agree on that. I'm going to show you a bit of a video of an interview I did with somebody called Karen Paul, and I'll let my past self explain that. So for our next section, I actually have the pleasure to introduce to you Karen Paul, who has been through the process of adoption before. She has adopted 2 beautiful children, and this way we get to have a bit of an insider's view on the process and how she's seen and been through it. So, hello, Karen. Thank you for coming to my interview today.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure's all mine. I was going to go through a few questions with you. That's okay?
Sure.
Awesome. So how old are your children?
My children now are 23 and 16 years old. My son is 23, my daughter's 16.
Oh, sweet 16. How old were they when you adopted them?
Lots of work.
Lots of work, I bet.
My son, when I adopted my son, he was 9 months old.
Oh, wow.
When I adopted my daughter, she was 6 months old.
Oh, wow.
And I had been involved with them since the day they were born. So very much, very young, and time has gone very quickly. It's hard to believe they're as old as they are now.
Yeah, it goes really fast, doesn't it?
It does.
So can you tell me a bit about them?
Yes, both my children were born with exceptionalities. So they were both born with a lot of challenges and a lot of health problems. So we've had a lot of challenges over the years, but they both overcome significant barriers. My son graduated and went on to join the Army.
Wow.
And my daughter is currently still in high school, graduating this year. And both children, as I said, were initially, people didn't hold out a lot of hope that they would have, as successful of lives as they've had because of their exceptionalities. But we've had some really great supports, and they do fantastic.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. She's graduating so soon, eh?
She's graduating this year in June.
Wow. And what were they like when you adopted them?
Both kids, as I said, were born with significant health issues. So the first 2 years of both of their lives were very, very challenging, with a lot of trips back and forth to the hospital, certainly a lot of doctor's appointments. But otherwise, I mean, every mom would say the same thing. Wonderful children, very, very talented. My son is extremely athletic, and my daughter is more into the arts, dancing and drawing and painting. So very early, their creativity came out, and their sports and athletic skills came out. So they've kept me very busy. With, just like any parent, try to keep your children involved in as much as they can be involved in.
And have you seen a lot of changes in them since then?
I have. Like I said, they've overcome a lot. Their confidence levels, their self-esteem. Certainly, they both know that they are adopted. So those have been challenging conversations and challenging times. As kids get older and they have those questions and want to ask those questions, they've had to, they've had to understand what that meant for them and find a place where they felt they belonged, even though they always belonged, certainly in my world, but they had to understand the adoption process for themselves and from the context of a child.
Yeah.
So,
do you feel they understand better now?
I do, yeah. It was never a secret in our home. We've always been very open that they were born in our hearts. And that's how we explained it when they were small children, and so they always understood adoption. They had always understood they had other members that were family, that they didn't live with. And I think it's sometimes harder for parents to know how to have that conversation than it is for children to accept the conversation.
You know what? That's probably true. So how was your adoption process?
The adoption process is, I'm not going to lie, it's a very lengthy process, and it can be quite trying and quite challenging. It's very, I've heard some people describe it as invasive or intrusive. The process begins with an application, and the application is multiple pages. I think the application is over 20 pages long, and they ask every possible question you can imagine, from your personal life, your partner's life. They ask what kind of job you do. They ask what your religious beliefs are, financial situation. So, I mean, everything is covered. They want to know everything about you in a 20-page document.
Right.
And then you go through 3 interviews where you, a social worker usually comes in, and they will check your home, and they do a top-to-bottom check of your home, and they interview you, and they go through the document you provided, ask more questions. You have to participate in what's called Pride training. So you have to take this training in order to be considered for adoption. And it's part, people have heard about it in fostering, but it's also for adoption.
Yeah.
And so then you kind of start waiting. In my case, the wait was very short because there were other factors involved in the children being placed with me. I was a foster parent as well.
Right. It can vary a lot.
So, you know, there's always different, people say it's a long wait. Some people I know have waited years. Other people have waited a very short period of time. What I would tell people is if they're willing to entertain adoption, don't wait for babies, because the children that are waiting to be placed are oftentimes older, and they need a home as well.
Absolutely.
So,
and did you face a lot of obstacles when you were going through the process?
I think the obstacles were probably more frustrations. The process itself, as I said, it seems to drag on. You know, the 3 interviews and the long application. It does seem to be, you know, a long process. But obstacles, no, I don't think obstacles. More just you have to have patience, and you have to let the process work itself out.
Were there things you worried about that you feel you didn't need to worry about?
I think you very much are the same as any new parent. You worry about things that you have no control over. My children's health. I mean, I think I was at a bit of an advantage in some ways that I knew already the health issues that I was facing with my children, so it wasn't a shock. But you worry about things like that. Will you be able to, you know, provide for the child? Will you be able to meet the medical needs they have? And I think now I worried a lot in the beginning that I didn't need to worry about, because it all just kind of falls into place.
Yeah, you figure it out as you go, I guess.
You do, like any parent. You know, I mean, you truly are, you know, a parent. You're not a biological parent, but everything is the same.
Yeah. Is there anything you would have done differently if you had the chance?
You know, I don't think there is. I think probably having more patience with the process, because I was very anxious to get things over with, and I probably stressed more than I needed to.
Yeah.
But no, I think I would have done everything the same. I certainly would have never changed my mind and gone a different route with either of my children. They're incredible human beings, and they bring so much to my world. So, you know, I think everything that I went through and everything they've gone through is just kind of
has built that bond.
It's supposed to have been. Yeah. Yeah.
And so now that you've been through adoption, do you feel differently now than you did before you went through it?
Do you mean about adoption?
Yeah.
I think I am more open to talking about it with other people and encouraging people, because I know more about how the process works. I like to share it with people, and I like for people to understand how many kids are out there that need homes, and that's an option for people wanting to have families is to look at adoption, and to look at adoption of older children, like the 2-year-plus children.
Absolutely.
Because there are so many children in the system right now that do need a home, a permanent home, that are growing up in foster care.
Absolutely.
And that's not what I want to see for any child.
No. I mean, there's over 400 children just in New Brunswick alone right now, so I agree with you.
It's overwhelming when you think about it. 400 children that don't have a place to call home.
Exactly. So do you have any advice for people thinking about adoption?
I would tell people to certainly look into the process, talk to others who have been through. There are some great groups open. If you just Google it on the internet, there are supports in New Brunswick to talk to other parents who've been through the process. You can call community agencies that can link you to those as well. And definitely seriously consider it, look into it. As we just said, with over 400 children looking for homes, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience to go through, and a great way to, I guess, fulfill your own dream of having a family, but also to give somebody the opportunity to have that family. And if you are not sure about adoption, you can always look into fostering, because that can also be a stepping stone to adoption.
That's true. Awesome. Well, that's all the time I had today, but thank you so much for coming in and letting me interview you today.
Well, thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. So that was my presentation on public adoption. I mean, adoption is an enormous subject, whether we talk about the post-adoption blues, how to care for children, or how to talk to them about adoption, from all the different types of adoption. Adoption is a big subject. So even when narrowing it down, we've still gone through a lot today. We've talked about who these different children are, what their barriers to adoption are, what your barriers to adoption are. We've looked at the process. We've heard from Zoe, who has been adopted at the age of 15. We've heard from Karen, who adopted children of her own here locally. And we've learned a lot, I hope, through this presentation. And I just want to remind you, questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll be checking them out for the next 2 weeks. And I just want to mention, it's okay if adoption isn't for you. The point is to think of your options, to be aware that the option is there, and to spread the right information about it. The more people know about adoption, the better chance we have for these children to be adopted and grow up in a family. So on the screen here are my references. Also, any of these books are a great read if you have more specific questions or you would like to know a little bit more, as well as any of these websites, of course. I will link them in the description of the video for your reference. So thank you so much for attending today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.